Good evening. My name is Teresa Dodson, and I'm the Voters Services Chair for the Canton League of Women Voters. As you may or may not know, next year, 2020, is the 100th anniversary of women's right to vote. So what better time to get involved with voting and the voting process? We thank you all for coming out to learn about the candidates firsthand. I can tell you being involved with the league is very rewarding, and getting to know all of the candidates firsthand and being involved in the many different activities of the town and really seeing firsthand how the democracy works. And voting is one of the most important things that we can all do. I come here in May to welcome seniors to voting for the first time as 18-year-olds, and we hope that they continue to be involved. For those of you who are here live, we appreciate it. For those that cannot be here in person, we are videotaping this, and it will be shown on public TV at a future date. Before we begin, as some of you may know, Ev Kubis, who was our leader for several different rotations of being president of the Canton League of Women Voters, has recently passed away, and she would have loved to be with us this evening. So if we can just take a moment to recognize her in all of the efforts that she made on behalf of the Canton League. Thank you. And I'm going to introduce Meg Gaines, who will be our moderator for this evening. The order for this evening, as I said, Board of Education will be going first because they have a double header. They have a meeting in the other part of the building that begins at 7, and then we will have the first Selectmen candidates, then the Board of Finance, and then the Board of Selectmen. So please get your questions ready. The students will come around and collect them, and we look forward to a great evening. Thank you all for being here.
Good evening. Thank you all for coming. Please get your questions in, especially Board of Ed, because they're here ready to answer questions, and I need questions. Otherwise, you have to listen to the questions I want to ask, and I don't live in town, so. We are starting with the Board of Ed. Please hold applause until the end of each section, and we will start right now, and they're going to go down and say their own names to introduce themselves, just to say their names, and then we'll start with questions.
Good evening, I'm Kim Sullivan.
Joe Scheidler.
Erica Hayes.
Nick Alagazakis.
Okay, so you're not in the order of the questions. Got it. Okay, first question goes to Ms. Sullivan. The Board of Education is considering funding a new position, Student Resource Officer. What are your thoughts?
I know this is a hot topic in town right now, and I was in support of supporting their school resource officer solely as school resource officer, and then after attending recent board meetings and listening to information that was presented, I'm more open-minded now to all the variables and factors that go into the reason for this, and some of them are the social, emotional, and learning that's going on with children, and I've listened to information about the guidance counselors and the support in that area as well, so I'm kind of understanding that there could be possibility of funding for a school resource officer, but also need for the counseling department as well. So I'm sort of undecided at the moment, but I know that this is definitely a need in Canton, and there needs to be funding for this to support the safety of all the children in the schools.
Thank you. The second question goes to Mr. Alagazakis. And the question is, research shows that more children experience trauma and suffering from anxiety and other mental health issues. How would you respond to the increasing number of students with emotional, behavioral, or mental health issues in the classroom?
That's a great question. It's vitally important that children feel comfortable while in the classroom, emotionally and physically. And I think by having counselors or the availability and resources available for children to express their feelings in both an open and a public setting would be vitally important to their growth in the school system.
Ms. Hayes, this is a long question. An article this year in Connecticut Voice magazine featured LGBTQ high school students. It quoted a transgender Canton High School student as saying that faculty and administration are supportive, but that many students are hostile. Kids are aware of their gender identity at a very early age, and with more public transgender role models now than ever, it's easier for children to be able to put a name on their gender discrepancy. About 40% of trans youth attempt suicide. How would you respond to the growing number of students who are transgender or non-binary?
I think mental health is a very important topic in our schools, and on the Board of Education, we take it very seriously, considering the children's mental health and acceptance of those different from themselves. It begins at a very young age, teaching children to articulate their feelings and identify them, and to have the teachers and parents model empathy and acceptance of those who are different from yourself, whether it be based on gender or ethnicity or any other reason. And I think just continuing the social-emotional learning that we've been doing, pushing that for kids of all ages is very important, and just keeping the programming going, the yearly education for students and parents and staff are very important.
Mr. Seidler, the next question. In the past few years, there have been many incidents in Canton and in the area of students around the issue of racism. What can the Board of Ed do to help students understand the issue more deeply?
Great question. It's also revealing that the first 4 questions all really have dealt with the same topic. They've dealt with the social and emotional well-being of the students in charge of the students of whom we are in charge. Racism being a particularly nasty issue that all schools have to deal with. That it's a priority for the Canton Board of Education that all students come to school feeling safe, feeling respected, feeling welcome. That all students have a chance to build relationships with faculty members, with other students, positive relationships, that there's social and emotional well-being. The issue of racism is a very difficult one. It's frequently there, it's frequently under the surface, occasionally it's out in front. Canton for 40 years, 50 years, has participated in a program with inner city students from Hartford, because one of the best ways to dispel racism is through contact, it's through experiences with people of other races and other ethnic backgrounds. And 100 youngsters from Hartford come to Canton every day. They get a great education, and our students get the opportunity to mix with, to learn from, to learn with, to understand students from different backgrounds and different races. Message to students has to be clear, that all students are welcome, that there is no place for racism in our schools or in our community. But that's demonstrated by the attitude that teachers take, that the administration takes, in terms of making sure that all students feel welcome, and that racist activities just have no place in our school.
Thank you. We're back to Ms. Sullivan. Excuse me. Increasingly, there are more and more demands on education. How would you prioritize, because there usually isn't more money to meet the demands?
Yes, I would agree. There are definitely more demands on education. And if I understood you correctly, asking about how would we meet the demands with the budgets remaining as they are. I think, obviously, the priorities for the Board of Education moving forward are definitely safety is one of the priorities, social emotional learning, and technology has also increased, and I think that the priority currently needs to be on social emotional learning, and I think that if children feel safe and are doing well in school, they'll be more apt to achieve academically, but I think keeping the budget at the same that it is, we have to still be creative and maintain programming that we have, and keep the things that are working, and look closely at different ways to add programming without cost, but certainly keeping the program that we have.
Thank you. Was that is that a question that just came across, is that for the Board of Ed? Okay. Okay, hang on. Excellent. Okay. The next question goes to Mr. Alexakis. Do you feel that there should be any future changes to the homework policy?
That's a great question. I haven't done homework myself in years, so I'm going to do my best at this.
Basically, how do you feel about homework?
I think homework is important. Homework is an excellent way to expand on what you've learned and use your time at home to condition yourself on additional learning. Learning cannot be learned entirely in a classroom, and it's vitally important for students to have personal responsibility in continuing to learn it, because as they graduate and go on to higher levels of education, more learning is done outside the classroom than inside the classroom. So it's vitally important for the growth and education and knowledge of our children to use homework as a tool to progress their learning and their ability to learn, not just in the classroom while a teacher is teaching it, but to help retain it in the future.
Thank you. Ms. Hayes, is the amount of computer use within the school appropriate?
I think that's a good question. It depends on the ages. Our teachers and administrators have done extensive amounts of research on this, and they have limited technology use for the younger ages, and as they get older and are more able to rely on these programs like Google Classroom and different programs, the teachers incorporate that into the work in the classroom. It helps when they are handing in papers. It allows for the teachers to easily access their work and provide feedback to the students, and for the students to get that and respond in a timely manner. But again, at the younger ages, I think, there is no replacement for a solid read aloud from a kindergarten teacher. I think that, the staff and administrators all view technology as an important part of our future, but realize its limits, and thank you for the question.
Thank you. Mr. Seidler, not every child will go to or can afford a four-year college. What are important ways we can introduce career pathways in our schools as an alternative to college?
Every child needs to be literate. Every child needs to be able to express themselves verbally and clearly and coherently. Every child needs to know what it means to be a citizen and the duties and responsibilities of citizenship. So we need to educate all students, whether they're going to college or not, that there are some basic things that they will need to be successful in whatever path they choose in life. And in 2019 and 2020 and beyond, there are an awful lot of need for probably everyone, almost everyone, but everyone, to have some education beyond high school, be that training to become a craftsman, training to become a plumber, training to become an electrician. Those trades are extremely valuable. The manufacturing industry in Connecticut is on a rebound, needs people who are trained to work there. What can Canton High School do for that? Well, it can't train students for that, but it can train students can expose students to those various kinds of skills. We do have maintained a comprehensive program, shop classes, industrial technology classes, and we can help students find the place after high school that will best suit the needs that they're interested in. Or we can help students find a way to the tech schools, which are alternative high schools.
I'm sorry I can't do this one because of our time. So get your questions in for the next boards. Please. Okay, we're going to go to our closing statements. Each candidate has 2 minutes for a closing statement. We'll begin with Ms. Sullivan.
First, I want to thank the Canton League of Women's Voters for hosting this forum tonight. I know that we have some prepared statements here, but I'm just going to speak straight from the heart. I lived in Canton for 16 years. My husband is originally from Canton, attended all the schools in Canton. And I have nieces and nephews who attended in Canton, my own 2 children. I have a daughter at Cherrybrook, Canton Intermediate School and a son at Cherrybrook Primary School. I'm passionate about education. Obviously, being a mother of young children, I'm passionate about education for my children, but for all the children in Canton. I was fortunate to have been a teacher for 14 years. 7 of those years were at Cherrybrook Primary School in Canton. So Canton education is dear to my heart, not just for my own children, but for the many students that I taught as well. I have been on the Canton Schools Early Childhood Task Force and was a board president at Canton Community Nursery School. I do work part-time at a preschool. Have been home with my children for 9 years, but in the years that they've been at Cherrybrook and now at CIS, I'm room parent and volunteer regularly in the classroom, and it keeps me connected to the teachers, students, and my children and their peers. So I've thoroughly enjoyed volunteering, and I've been attending board meetings and advocating for smaller class size, additional para support in the classroom, and those results were positive. I've been impressed with our Board of Education and the members they've had on the board for years, and I think I can bring a unique perspective to the Board of Education, having been a teacher, but also a mom, and I'm the youngest of learners in Canton. I think it's, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Alexakis.
I'd like to thank the Canton League of Women Voters for having us here this evening to discuss the issues, and we've talked about many issues this evening from mental health, diversity, and technology, and I feel that our schools are where our future leaders, innovators, scientists, artists, and workforce gain the knowledge and tools they need to ensure their success. And if we work together to create the policies and procedures to help them be successful and the tools they need in order to learn in a safe environment, and I think that would foster an educational system that we can be proud of as a town, and knowing that we've ensured the success of our children's future.
Okay, thank you. That's fine. Ms. Hayes.
I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting us tonight and all the efforts put into this program. And I'd like to thank everyone who has come here tonight to gather more information. Thank you for coming out. Again, my name is Erica Hayes, and I have lived in Canton for 12 years. I currently have 2 children enrolled in the Canton Public Schools. I have served on the Board of Education for the last year and gained valuable insight on the finance and curriculum committees. I have volunteered extensively in all 4 of the schools, and I believe that the board works best when its members are open-minded and come to the table as collaborative and creative thinkers without any agendas. As a board member, I will continue to listen to students, families, and staff, and to evaluate tough issues with extensive thought, information, and research. I will make decisions with the whole child in mind, as well as what is best for all of the students in the Canton schools. I will continue to keep the mental health of our children as a top priority and stress the importance of social emotional learning to students of all ages. I believe deeply in public service and am committed to doing my part to ensure the children of Canton continue to get an excellent education and preparation for their future, whatever it may hold. I would be honored to serve on the Canton Board of Education for the next 4 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Seidler.
Thank you to the League for arranging this evening. Thank you to my grandson, who's at his first political event. Preparing the next generation to be independent, productive, respectful, and responsible citizens who can contribute to an ever-changing world, and providing them with challenging educational experiences that promote their intellectual, physical, social, and emotional potential. Those aren't my words. That's the mission statement of the Board of Education. We remind ourselves of that very important mission every single meeting. We believe it's an important mission. I've had the privilege of living that mission by serving our community and our schools for almost 4 decades as a teacher, athletic director, and as a principal. I've had the honor of continuing that service the last 4 years as a member of the Board of Education, and I'm seeking to do so again. Public education has been the work of my professional life, and I look forward to continuing that. I can tell you that the Board of Education operates in a very nonpartisan manner. The focus of the board is implementing our mission for all our students insofar as possible. 2 examples. The past 4 years we created a class size policy, emphasizing the best optimal conditions, especially for elementary students. We support a wide range of challenging courses at the secondary level, including open enrollment and advanced placement courses, an opportunity for all students. We made a commitment to improving and strengthening the program choice program, opportunity for our students to meet students from Hartford. We are committed to educating the whole child with an emphasis on social and emotional learning. We created a new homework policy so students can keep balance in their lives. I guess I'm down to a few seconds here. There are lots of things to do. So school safety is an issue. The role of technology in education is an important issue. Social and emotional learning is an important issue. I'm done, I guess. 5 seconds. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much to our Board of Education candidates. And we'll have a quick change here and have first welcome. Thank you very much. Okay, are we ready? Excellent. Okay, we have candidates next for the office of First Selectman of Canton. Can you say your names for us, please?
Certainly. My name is Bob Bessel.
My name is Arnie Goldman.
Excellent. And we will get right to the questions. We'll start with Dr. Goldman. What should the town be doing to encourage commercial development in the Route 44 corridor?
Thank you for the question. Route 44 is an interesting problem because it's our primary thoroughfare and our primary availability of developable land, and the place where most people who are willing to support development can accept it. The problem, however, is that utilities are not fully available along the full length of Route 44. And to further complicate matters, there's an extremely large water main that supplies water into the city of Hartford, right smack in the middle of the road, making it problematic and very expensive to deal with the absence of utilities. It's been estimated that to bring utilities the full length of 44 would cost $11.5 million. And with a potential economic return to the community of about $1.5 million a year, assuming, say, 3.5% development income from that, it would take 20 years to have that pay off. And many people would say, well, why should we invest as a community? Why should we invest in that and support the success of private developers? And so, you know, it's a fair question. However, if we do nothing and don't at least pursue the possibility of having the utilities go up Route 44, there's no chance of getting them where they need to be, and then we forego any potential for that development until such time as the general economic conditions in Canton and in the state change. And, you know, that's something for the voters and the taxpayers to decide, but certainly I support doing what we can do to bring utilities up Route 44 and make it possible to develop that land. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bessel, does Canton need a new firehouse?
There's been quite a bit of study done over the years on the firehouse and fire facilities, and the firehouse I think that's in question is the Collinsville Volunteer Firehouse. I actually toured that facility with Kevin Whitcoast when we were both on the Canton Board of Ed, and we noticed quite a few deficiencies back then. So something needs to be done with that firehouse, certainly to bring it up to current standards, to make it big enough and to hold the equipment, and to hold the people, and to give them an opportunity to meet and learn what's best, and to talk about what best practices. In terms of, do we need to tear that whole firehouse down and build a new one? Do we need to have a turnaround so that fire trucks don't have to back in, they can drive right through? I'm not sure exactly if we need all of that. We're going to need to have additional studies, or we're going to have a pretty thorough study as to how, what the need really is and what the cost is. So a cost-benefit analysis, of course, to see how much of a facility is really necessary. I would anticipate that we're going to do some building there. Just exactly what remains to be seen.
Thank you. Another fire department question for Dr. Goldman. What are your thoughts about paid fire department staff?
Well, as some of you may know, I was in the Canton Volunteer Fire and EMS Department for 12 years as an active firefighter. And so one thing that has changed over recent decades is that most of the volunteers do not work in our community. And during the daytime, many of them are not here, and the response has been weak to risky at times. And so the idea of supplementing the volunteers with paid firefighters at least will cover those hours when the volunteers are unavailable. And I'd like to say that to those who may be skeptical of this, it's not unusual across the country. Most fire departments are volunteer in nature. And volunteerism, unfortunately, has taken a hit in recent decades, in recent generations, for a variety of reasons. And it's not unusual to have a mixed department. And one might think, well, why would volunteers commit when they see that other people are getting paid to do the work? But the way to look at it is that you need the coverage. It affects all of our homeowners insurance, and it affects life safety. Not to dramatize it or over-dramatize it, but that is important. And so as it turns out, the best way to do that is to have people who are career engaged by being available in the daytime, and that would be what the goal is. And again, we're not looking to make a career fire department, but we're looking to supplement our volunteers so that we can have a fully professional fire department that's mixed, volunteer and paid firefighters.
Thank you. Mr. Bessel, how is the town doing on town road improvements and paving?
Well, from what I can see, the town is doing quite a bit better than it was a few years ago when we discovered that we were dramatically underfunding road maintenance. That's the result of an extensive road study, and funding has been put into what has been established to pave, repave, restore roads that have been long neglected. So I think that program is doing fairly well. But I think we also need to look at streets in a little bit more comprehensive way. If we pave them absolutely smooth, which we want, and wider to accommodate more traffic, we see something else, which is excessive speed, and we see more danger. And we have a community now that values pedestrian access, bike access, and if we have roads that encourage people to speed, those people are going to be threatened. So I believe that we need to look at something called complete streets. Some of these ideas have been put into practice very effectively in West Hartford, where literally the design of the roads calms the traffic without impeding the actual flow of the traffic. It's a little bit of magic that I've actually seen studies on as part of my duties on the Economic Development Agency. So I think we need to look more comprehensively at this. It's kind of like the next chapter in road development in town.
Thank you. Dr. Goldman, climate change is causing more severe and extreme rainfall and other extreme weather events. What plans do you have for Canton to plan for mitigating the risk of increased flooding from the Farmington River?
Well, the hydro project that is well underway is going to result in improvements to the sluiceway gates, allowing 3 additional feet of water retention, and the ability to control that by lowering and raising those gates such that we can drain water in a controlled fashion and avoid the kind of flooding that you're referring to. As far as general climate mitigation, the other things that we've done in the community already that are underway now include energy efficiency projects in all town buildings, as well as the installation of solar panels, which will create energy, which we'll use ourselves at the garage and the sewage treatment plant, and be able to sell back to the energy Eversource, and that such that it will offset the cost of electricity here in the community. Beyond that, I think it's a much bigger issue than just our small town, but I think we can do what we can, do our part to address that matter. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bessel, excuse me, pesticides including neonics are threatening pollinators and public health due to their persistence in the soil, ability to leach into the environment, their high water solubility, and potential negative health implications for non-target organisms such as pollinators. Question: what is your position on the use of pesticides on town-owned land? And do you support or oppose the use of pesticides on private property?
That's a great question, and quite unexpected. But let me say that I'm a big believer in organic wherever I can. Organic means of pest control and other things. So I would certainly encourage the town of Canton to employ those means on town-owned property, and I believe that there are grants available to help towns transition over from pesticides to organic, recyclable, renewable sources. The town for a long time had a program where I think high school students would actually take samples of insects in Jim Brook, that passes through the shops, and by looking at those insect samples, we're able to actually determine the effect of pesticide runoff from the golf course, and of course now the shops and other things. That program, I'm not sure if it continues, but if it were to continue in Jim Brook and also expanded into Cherry Brook and other waterways in town, we'd have a much better idea of what the situation is, and then be able to actually construct a program that would be appropriate to the needs at hand. I think in terms of private property owners, it'd be a little draconian to go in there to tell them that they can't all of a sudden use any of the pesticides that they have, or much as we might like to. But if we can encourage by example and also by education that this is a better way to go and provide better ways to do it, I think they would come along.
Thank you. Dr. Goldman, what would be your position about the town of Canton encouraging affordable housing in town?
Well, I think that's a great question, and that's a very important question. Our apartment stock is about 15%, and compared to about 24% in most communities, and most of that we have is in old houses. And so if we're going to be a diverse community and we're going to have our young people potentially stay here and come back, we've got to have housing that they can afford at an entry level. So I think that for all those reasons, encouraging affordable housing is very important.
Thank you. Mr. Bessel, what's your position on the wildlife in town? Does the town have responsibility to try to get people to not feed the animals, or there are a lot of bears around?
We'll get to the heart of the matter. I think education on on the dangers of feeding bears and proper disposal of garbage is one thing, but of course that's going to be reinforced by our many experiences with the bears. I don't think we're at the point where we need to have a town-wide bear hunt, but I think that education is probably our best way to out of the bear situation. If the bears overrun us, then I'm sure that that we can appeal to the state for relief from the Bear Kingdom.
Thank you. We'll go to closing statements now. So we start with Dr. Goldman.
I'll sacrifice a few seconds to say that the Bear family is appreciative of this. The first selectman fills many roles: elected official, community cheerleader, Board of Selectmen chair, and most importantly, chief communicator. As the voice of the community, every resident must be heard, especially when difficult decisions have to be made. The first selectman is not a boss over the Board of Selectmen. They do, however, serve as an arbiter of diverse opinions, guide discussion, and help achieve thoughtful decisions that are best for the town. Transparency and a mind open to differing perspectives are essential to achieve compromise acceptable to all residents while balancing services with available funds. As Board of Finance Chair, I have achieved just this sort of compromise, balancing the community's needs with the recognition that taxpayer resources are not unlimited. That board, too, is composed of volunteers with varied perspectives, but we were able to achieve budgets that preserved essential services and tax increases that were, by most accounts, considered reasonable. 25 years ago, I chose to build my life in Canton. I've been in business, helped raise our children, and shared all that Canton offers. All along, I've made it a point to give back. As a volunteer firefighter, Sam Collins Day treasurer, chamber president, Collinsville bank director, community organization donor, and on town boards, including the Board of Finance, I've gained a broad perspective on our community and its values. We don't agree on everything, but we always come together to do what's best for Canton. It may sound old-fashioned, but Canton has all of what's best about a small town, one where we look out for each other. Our outstanding schools, efficient town departments, and caring volunteers all support the conviction that Canton is special. By working together, we'll keep Canton the great community that it is. I've been all in for Canton for 25 years, and I hope to serve you as your first selectman. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bessel.
For several months, I've had the honor of meeting many of you. These encounters have given me the chance to learn what you think and to help me form some solutions that will help move Canton forward. The common issues in Canton are empty storefronts and blighted buildings, protecting the environment, taking care of our most vulnerable citizens, and exercising fiscal smarts. It didn't matter if the voter was a Republican, a Democrat, or unaffiliated. These are everyone's issues. I found something else on the campaign trail, which is respect. In Canton, we take good ideas and we combine them with other good ideas to make them even better. And we also work together, like Arnie and I did earlier this year, to reduce our sky-high sewer connection fees, one of the major obstacles to building our tax base. And I think we finally got that done. I'm running for first selectman because I believe this way of thinking will make a difference in Canton. My record on the Board of Education and on the Economic Development Agency is one of bringing people and ideas together for Canton. If the Axe Factory gets sold, and we hope it does, we will have to figure out parking and connections to the other areas of town as part of the development plan. And the same thing holds true with Canton Village and empty buildings on Route 44. We have to work together. We also need to understand what's going on in town. Let's face it, it's hard for voters to care about issues that they don't know anything about. And when voters don't care, we lose their wisdom. And their wisdom is the secret sauce for good town decisions. I want to reduce barriers to attendance at town meetings. Community TV and meeting apps can help. So can discussion forums and babysitting services for young parents. We should also provide seed money for an online news blog to keep citizens informed. When I talk like that, people might assume that I mean new taxes. You gotta stop.
However you all vote, we'll work together.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next we have the Board of Finance. Please, please, please put in questions. We now have the candidates for the Board of Finance, and they will introduce themselves by just saying their name. So why don't we just go down and then we'll do it in the order that we figured out, okay?
Ken Humphrey,
Katie Kenny.
Andrew Lavery.
Jonathan Webb,
Okay, thank you. The first question goes to Mr. Humphrey. How can Canton's Board of Finance buffer against late or unexpected reductions from the state of Connecticut in cost sharing?
thank you. That is a very diligent operation for us. We have been doing that for several years. That's a very realistic question as we live in Board of Finance. We have for the last couple of years. The state, and I'm not going to go into that. Everybody here knows what the state does financially to the towns. The hardest thing on this is we have to set the budget before the state of Connecticut sets their budget. And so what happens afterwards, we find out what the damage is after the fact. So the best course we've chosen over the last couple of years is to actually plan ahead on this type of maneuver from the state to ensure that the general fund has enough money in there. I'm very much opposed to going to an out-of-cycle tax for the citizens of this town if the state really does the damage to us. We have been threatened 2 years ago very much by the state in not funding a number of the projects. Because you got to sit and think this through. What exactly are we going to cut if we're shortchanged by the state and what they owe us? Do we go to the school and say, we know you're doing a good education job, but cut out all the sports because we're not going to be able to fund that? Do we go to the town library and say, how about just close the doors and lock it and walk away? So these are things we have to deal with, and that's a realistic situation for us, and we do face this. And as I said, we diligently put that in our budget and we work with it. And I'm not going to give you numbers because I can't think of them right off the top of my head anyways. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Are there other questions? Okay. Okay, this goes to Mr. Webb. What should be the capital project priorities for the Board of Finance?
Great question. I believe for the most part that we as a board represent the taxpayers, citizens of Canton, and to balance the needs of the capital projects that are important to address due to safety or increased cost to maintain with the needs and desires of the town and citizens, and to have an open dialogue and be transparent about what the priorities are and present them to the town and solicit feedback. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Kenny, am I saying your name right? Yes. Thank you. Okay. What role does political party membership play on the Board of Finance?
For most of the issues that we deal with on the Board of Finance, very little. There's a great deal that we need to do that is pretty straightforward in terms of finding out what the needs are from the different departments and doing what we can within the means that we have to meet those needs. At the same time, though, I would say that there are overall philosophies that guide people that are related to their party affiliation. And I know that in my own case, as a Democrat, I believe very strongly in the power of government to improve people's lives. And I think it's important for us to do what we can at the local level as well as at higher levels to make that happen, within government. So there are different emphases in the different parties. I think the main focus that we have to deal with is the benefit of the town and how we can all work together.
Thank you. Mr. Lavery, are you going to work together on helping finance the senior meals with the Board of Ed, getting the seniors healthier meals like our children get in school instead of what you pay for through CRT? I'm not sure what CRT is. Community renewal team. Seems to be a way for healthy meals, to get healthier meals for less. So,
When it comes to funding for anything in this town, Board of Finance always works well together to make sure all the needs of the citizens are met. When it comes to, in particular, the meals for the seniors that were mentioned in the question, that's always going to be a top priority. We want to make sure that every citizen in this town has a good experience. We are healthy, we're happy, and we're all contributing members of our communities. So the Board of Finance will always work well with each other, with the Board of Ed and the Board of Selectmen to ensure that all of our citizens' needs are met.
thank you. Mr. Humphrey. I'm looking to see if there are more questions, because I think I'm just going to sort of go down the road with this. What do you think the town's biggest challenges are in the next 5 years? How are you going to meet that financially? ...
Well, one of the items has already been mentioned, and that's going to be the replacement or rehab of the fire station, Collinsville Fire Station. That will be a bonding job. Our bonding right now, as done by bonding agencies, we're AA, which is very good. And I personally think that that's our goal. We have already set our bar to sustain that rating. That is probably the second item, is to maintain that bond rating. Now, that may be a little unknown why that affects you as the citizens of this town, but that's the cost of what we borrow money at. And the lower that bond rating is, the higher the interest rate of the borrowing we pay for. So it behooves us very much to keep that bond rating at a AA. I'd like to have triple, but I've already read the requirements for that, and that's more like, Bill Gates level. We're not going to do that. That, we have a number of other projects coming down the road. I know we got some land acquisition that's coming up. They're dealing with the state. I would like to see that carried through. That, I think we should do that out of the general fund and not do that as a bond. And that's about it. I'm thinking right off the top of my head. I'm sorry about that. I'm probably going cold up here, but I will maintain that the roads will still be paved. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Webb, same question.
Could you repeat it?
What do you think the town's biggest challenges are in the next 5 years?
Thank you. I mentioned this a little bit in my last response, and I think balance is a great word. So again, it's to look at the infrastructure that we have and provide the proper amount of resources to maintain what we have and not put ourselves into a situation where further on down the road it will actually cost more. And again, balancing those expenses to the extent that taxpayers are willing to pay, and also to the extent that we are willing to go to bonding for, and again, balancing the ability to keep the finances of the town in the manner that will maintain a high bond rating. So I would say the next 5 years, again, for the most part, it's balancing all of the needs of the town, the infrastructure, and what the taxpayers are willing to pay.
Thank you. Ms.
Kenny.
Kenny.
One of the most important things that we can do as public finance officers for the town is to engage in long-term planning for the town and to involve citizens in that process. We need to think about the next 5 years, but we also need to think about the next 10 years and the next 20 years. And according to the Government Finance Officers Association, which puts out best practices for public finance at the town and state level, engaging in strategic planning on those kinds of time horizons, involving citizens in the process in a very collaborative way, and then using that process to also engage in financial planning and make decisions about what is most important for the town and how we can align our long-term goals with our current spending is a really central aspect to our responsibility as public finance officers.
Thank you. And Mr. Laker.
I would say if I could pick one, I would have to say it's the diversification of our tax base. And what I mean by diversification is just commercial versus residential. We talked about it earlier on stage, great potential on Route 44. However, the cost to even just begin the possibility of commercial expansion on Route 44 is very, very steep. The Axe Factory would be another great way to diversify our tax base. And really the main purpose of the diversification of the tax base would be so that there's less reliance on the residential tax base to help fund all the needs of the town. If we can grow the grand list and we can grow it on a commercial way, more so on the residential way, we can grow it residentially of course, but if we can grow it more commercially, there's going to be less strain on our schools, there's going to be less strain on many resources in the town, while providing a huge expansion to our grand list, which will provide many more resources to all of us for all the little things and all the big things that we want to see happen in the town.
Thank you. I'd like to do a quick round. We have time for this question as well, because there were 2 questions about the fire department. So Board of Finance probably has some input on that. So let's see what your thoughts are on a new firehouse and a paid department, or paid staff in the department. So Mr. Humphrey.
Well, the answer to the first part is that something has to be done to the firehouse. Whether, and I'm not going to make a decision at this time, opinion-wise, personal opinion, on whether it should be torn down and rebuilt or just rehab the one in place. I'm not an engineer, so I don't know that. So on the financial side, we definitely are going to have to finance this one way or another, whether the decision is made to tear down or rehab it. We know this is coming down the line. This is one of the long-term planning that we were just talking about. We know it's coming. We've been talking about this for 2 years in the Board of Finance. So this is something we're dealing with. We're prepping for it. We're financially setting up the town to be able to take this on. You, the taxpayers, be able to pay for it. This is not out of the blue sky. We're just going to pull it out of the air and say, oh, by the way, we've got this. No, this is something we've been dealing with for 2 years and actually setting it up to be able to afford to pay for this. And the second part of the question was fire department.
Having paid staff.
Right, paid staff. Mr. Coleman pretty much emphasized that there is a need. Back in the day, old days, it was all farmers who got together and fought the fires. But times have changed. In the modern age, we don't have that. Everybody's living out of town, and we just don't have the volunteers physically in town to do it. We have the volunteers, but not physically here. So there is a stopgap way to do it, and that's having a paid fireman there during the daytime. I think we've already gotten funding for this down the line. Part of this. I have no problems with that. I think that's good, and I've just got to stop something.
Thank you. Mr. Webb.
Thank you. Looking down the road and looking at future expenditures and trying to make contingencies for when they will be facing the town, I think is a very difficult thing to do, but nonetheless it still needs to be done, and that's exactly the issue with the firehouse right now. Just as with our personal residence, automobiles, anything, we need to look forward and know that someday there is something that we'll need to replace. Not necessarily knowing how it's going to be done, and specifically, thankfully, knowing that we're not charged with that as this board, but certainly lining up the funding, being prepared for it, and not being surprised is clearly a priority, and it's wonderful to hear that it's already in the works. But I believe it's definitely something that needs to be funded now and put into projections going forward into the future. With regards to a paid firefighter staffed by the town, I think for the most part the safety is the utmost importance, and that's one of the things that a government is charged to do. And to the extent that there is not the opportunity to have volunteers that properly staff a firehouse for the community is unsafe, and certainly if the only alternative is to pay professionals, then I think that's definitely something that needs very serious consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Kenny.
Yes. I'm going to take the questions upside down, because I think on the second part I have no doubt that we need to listen to what the fire department is telling us about the availability of staff during the day, and respond to that and say, okay, if we need to have some paid firefighters to cover that and make sure that people are safe, of course that's important. On the issue of the firehouse, I think we need to look at that very carefully. And from North Canton, and North Canton overbuilt a bit when they created their very large new firehouse. And as a result, they ended up having to hand that very big new firehouse over to the town because they couldn't afford to maintain the payments on it. So it's a slightly different situation when we're looking at this firehouse, but while making sure that we have a firehouse that's safe and is able to house our trucks and do all the things that we need it to do is important, we also have to be careful to be looking at what the cost is, what the need really is, and make sure that we're not overbuilding and we're not succumbing to the desire that sometimes happens of people to have the biggest, flashiest new toys and the biggest, flashiest new house to keep their toys in.
Thank you. Mr. Laker.
When it comes to, should we build a new firehouse or should we renovate the existing one? I'm open to either idea, to tell you the truth. There's no such thing as a bad idea. What I do want for all of us is that our public safety officers, whether it be fire, police, ambulance, whatever the case, that they're properly staffed, they're properly funded, and they have all the tools they need. We're going to ask them to go into our burning house and save our dogs, save our children, save us, keep our neighbor's house from burning down. They need the equipment that they need to get the job done. Personally, I would never ever skimp on that. They need the best of the best to keep themselves safe and to keep us safe. I'm not sure what the answer is with regards to the building of a new firehouse. I want to make sure that the firemen and all the personnel in there have what they need, but at the same time we need to balance that with what the taxpayers can afford. And if the best way to strike that balance is to renovate the firehouse, then I think that would be the way to go. If the firehouse is just beyond repair and there's just too costly to renovate, and the way to go is to construct a new one, then I would be open to that idea as well. There's no such thing as a bad idea in a situation like this. With regards to paid firefighters mixed in with our volunteers, if we're not getting the volunteers that we need, and I'm sure our chief is working very diligently to secure the volunteers that we need, good qualified volunteers. Then if we can't get them, then we need a paid fireman or 2 or 3, whatever the case is. I don't want to have to look at anyone in this room or anyone at home watching right now and say, oh, sorry, we couldn't save your house from burning down because we just couldn't get enough volunteers. If we need people in that firehouse, and if what we have to do is to get paid ones, then that's what we'll do.
Thank you. Mr. Humphrey, how does the undesignated fund balance affect the town's bond rating, and what policies regarding fund balance should this Board of Finance have?
Thank you. The effects on the bonds is very strong. It's mentioned every time we get a bond rating that comes down, it says that our bond rating where we stand, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we're around 15% right now. I know 10, 15 years ago that would have been outrageous, but in our current world of finances, they actually want us around 30%. We're not going to achieve that in the town of Canton. We don't have enough private citizens to tax to get that high. But 15% gave us a double A. That's how it affects it. If we drop that rating down, or the amount of money in the general fund down, it will affect that bond rating. And as I mentioned earlier, so we go to borrow money, it's going to cost us more. Well, costing us more means we raise the rate to tax you more. So I personally believe that it's there for a really good purpose. If we have something, we need some money. And I'll give you an example. Last spring, we had to have the refrigerator at the high school replaced. We had the money to do that in cash. And I think that's a very good reason for it. That refrigerator, walk-in freezer, was not sustainable anymore. If it broke, we were going to lose the food inside. We were going to have a lot. So we thought forward on this. Let's replace it now before it breaks. And that's where it came in. And I can't remember the second part of the question, but I already got the flag, so thank you.
Okay, so let's keep going with this question. Mr. Webb.
Thank you. I'll say it again, balance. To the extent that there is not enough in the fund balance, then it clearly affects the bond rating and the cost to the town and subsequently to the taxpayers. The flip side of that is having too high of a fund balance, although it looks very good to the bond rating agencies, it creates a situation where arguably we are taxing the citizens at too high of a rate, and those dollars would be better served back in the community's pockets. Certainly, the more money you have there, the greater the ability is to address any potential contingency that is presented to the town, but at the same time, again, it being too high puts the taxpayers in a position where they are paying too much. So I think that balance is the key, to be in a situation where it's not adversely affecting your ability to bond for projects. You can do it competitively, but at the same time not taxing the citizens to such a high level that there's too much in the fund balance. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Kenny.
This is one of those lovely issues where there really isn't a Republican or a Democratic answer. I would say that Ken gave the right answer, absolutely. The town has worked hard to get the fund balance up high enough so that we can get that double A rating. It's very important to maintain it. And again, we can't go maybe as high as the government finance organization recommendations would be, because we don't have the means to do that. But maintaining it at least where it is very important to maintain our rating so that we can borrow at the best rates.
Thank you. Mr. Lakery.
Really, I think the way I look at this is, the financial health of the town is unbelievably important for all of us, not just for one reason, but for many, many different reasons. And all the reasons can be different. It could be 100 different reasons in this room right now why the financial health of the town is important. So keeping that fund balance at a respectable or even higher than respectable percentage is going to pay dividends for us in the long run. The borrowing is going to be a lot cheaper for one of those big projects like potentially new firehouse or extensive paving work on our roads. To echo some of Mr. Webb's comments too, with regards to, if we get it up, say 30%, are we taxing too high? And if we're just sitting with that money, we're just holding on to that money, then that money is not being spent in our communities, it's not being put to good work. Money can be put to better work in your pockets, being spent at local stores and mom-and-pop coffee shops, helping support those jobs and the businesses that we need here in our town.
Thank you. We will now move to our closing statements, and we start again with Mr. Humphrey.
I want to thank you. This is about the third or fourth time I've been on this stage, and I've yet not to be number one. So I thank you very much. I've been on the Board of Finance for 10 years, and I appreciate all of you putting me in that position. I've really enjoyed it. There's a lot of history that goes into the Board of Finance. You have to know what's happened in the past to be able to manage the current situation on the Board of Finance. The people to my left have a power curve, or learning curve, I should say, and they're very intelligent, and you're going to be able to achieve it. To bring this forward into the future, I'm really looking forward to that, because we have a dynamics that's going on in our board that has just changed. We're going to grow, and we got some new people with some new backgrounds, and they're very much going to be watching your back. There was a very famous guy in this town who quoted me and said, the Board of Finance is the only board that really watches out for the individual taxpayers in this town. Not that the Board of Education and the Board of Selectmen don't do it, but that's our primary goal in this board, is to watch your back with your money. That money that's sitting in the general fund we were just talking about, that's your tax money that was taxed from your private property. And that's how we look at it, and we've always looked at it, and I've looked at it for 10 years. That's not free money. That doesn't grow on trees. That has to come from somewhere. So to go forward with that, that's what I'm going to do for the next 4 years, is always have that in mind. The taxpayers, the senior citizens that are on fixed incomes, and I just got the red flag again. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Webb.
Big thanks to the League of Women Voters for hosting this event. Thank you to fellow candidates and all the board members and board candidates for the time and serving, and the students for helping out tonight, and of course the attendees and those watching. My wife and I chose Canton as a place we wanted to raise our family back in 2003. We loved it because it was a growing small town that was continuously improving, but it was also very proud of the rural and historic community that it was and still is. Because we believed in giving back through community involvement and public service, I served on different boards and committees over the years. I was a founding board member of the Canton Education Foundation, also served on Canton's Pension Commission. In 2007, I joined the Board of Ed, where I chaired the Facilities Subcommittee and oversaw the study committee that looked into and eventually moved to a vote for the track and multi-purpose field. I was also a member of the first Elderly Tax Relief Committee, served on the executive board of Lights on Canton, and have coached various youth athletics in town. Professionally, I'm a certified financial planner and a partner of a firm in Berlin, and I dream someday of having a satellite office in the Axe Factory. But the process that I follow in my business with private clients is one of being a fiduciary, which I think is very important and very similar to that of being on the Board of Finance is, again, being a fiduciary. The definition is to put others and the end user ahead of yourself when making all decisions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Kenny?
I'm running for the Board of Finance because I have the training, I have a PhD in public affairs, and because I want to make our town government more creative and more forward-thinking. I've been struck by how often the answer to any question about improving our community is a shake of the head and, oh, can't do that, we can't afford that kind of thing. But that assumes that the only way to pay for good things is by raising property taxes. And by starting at we can't, we don't even look for alternative sources of funding to get to yes we can. Two very small examples. First, I'm restoring my family's farmland in North Canton, and when I first talked to Stephen Bristol about my plans, he suggested a state grant that might help. So I did the research and found a farmland restoration grant from the State Department of Agriculture. I applied and got matching funds to cut back brush that was taking over our fields and build deer fencing to protect my new baby orchard. During that process, I noticed a different state grant that helps towns support and promote local farms. If you've ever been to Granby's Open Farm Day, that's the kind of program that can get funding through that town grant, or the state grant to towns. It helps farmers, but it also helps the town by bringing people in. So Canton could apply for that. And then when Bob Bessel was answering a question earlier about organic land management, I discovered that several towns in Canton are doing organic land management. And as a member of the Conservation Commission, I attended a convention where there was a presentation. It turns out that we can get grant funding to make a transition to organic land management as well. Those are just two examples of funding that we could get to do good things in town. And they came from my own experience, and I'm not even a paid grant researcher, right? So what if we support our town departments in finding funding from the federal government, from the state, from foundations, from nonprofits, and even hire a grant writer to help them find it? That kind of Canton can do it is the approach that I want to bring to the Board of Finance.
Thank you. Mr. Lakeman?
I just wanted to open up with just saying a little bit about myself. Grew up in Windsor Locks. I joined the Navy right out of high school. I was in the Navy for nearly 11 years. As soon as I got out of the Navy, I went to Southern Connecticut State University and got my bachelor's degree in economics. And I currently work right now at the Hartford as a business consultant in Group Benefits Division. And I'm working on my Six Sigma Yellow Belt. My wife and I moved here to Canton in December 2016. My wife graduated from high school here, so she was very familiar with the town. But I knew of the town, but I don't even think I had ever been to the town prior to knowing my wife. And once I started to come here to visit some of her family, and once we moved here, I immediately recognized what makes Canton so great. You have this such small town feel, you have great people, you have wonderful schools, very safe town, and just instantly I wanted to be a part of that. It wasn't long after being here, I filled a vacancy on the Board of Finance. I'm a current Board of Finance member. I wasn't elected to that position. There was a vacancy midterm, and I filled that. I've been on the board now for 1 year. And what I've learned so far on the board is that there are so many different diverse opinions and so many things that the town needs, and to try to balance all that can be challenging at times, but with a strong board that we have, and that we will have after this election, I have no doubt that we can achieve all those goals together with the community input, of course, too, is always very, very important. But going forward, I just want to be a contributing member to this community, help the Board of Finance get the town's finances and keep them in order, and just make sure that everyone has a strong, safe place to live. Thank you.
Thank you very much to our 4 candidates for Board of Finance. Thank you. We will start now with the candidates for Board of Selectmen, and we'll start right here and go down the line. Just say your name, please.
Tom Blatchley.
Hello, I'm Gail Deutsch.
Warren Humphrey. Tim Legette.
Katie Lucas.
Thank you. Okay, we start. First question goes to Mr. Blakeslee. With a large number of vacancies on our local boards and commissions, how do you stay motivated to serve, and how do you motivate and encourage others to volunteer?
That's an excellent question. As Arnie had referenced earlier, keeping volunteers, securing new people to volunteer and engaging people for public participation is a challenging endeavor for any community, particularly in Canton. I was looking the other day at the boards and commissions. There are approximately 35 boards, commissions, and committees, most of which have openings. And that presents a challenging but yet unique opportunity to engage the citizens, foster development, and get people to try to join these boards, committees, and commissions. One thing that I'd like to do is create an open roundtable, maybe a monthly meeting or quarterly, to engage the public. Certainly we could do more with the town website, and we are doing that to foster and promote these opportunities. I talk to a lot of people daily, and that seems to be an issue, just the lack of knowledge or information that's available, even though it is largely available on the town website and through information that's passed through newsletters, etc. But I think there are opportunities to get people engaged, to promote those opportunities, and to show how that people can, by working for the town and a volunteer opportunity, can shape and develop the town and make the town better. And that's why, for one of the reasons I'm here, running for the Board of Selectmen, is I want to get back to the community and make Canton just a better place. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question is for Mr. Humphrey. What opportunities does Canton have for additional regionalization?
One of the things, I'm currently on the Board of Selectmen, and I'm an ex officio member of the Farmington Valley Health District. That is a tremendous example of how to do regionalization. That we've got the health district for all of our towns in the local area. That's the type of model that we would want to follow. There may be things in terms of, for example, emergency 911 callers, be able to do that on a regional basis rather than just on a town basis. One of the things that of course, I don't want to stray into the Board of Education side of things, but I would not be excited about having the schools regionalized.
Thank you. Mr. Legette, please identify one town department that you believe can most benefit from increased funding.
Would you repeat the first part of that question?
Please identify one town department that you believe can most benefit from increased funding.
I think the Board of Education can benefit from increased funding. Not so much because I spent 30 years teaching in Canton, but because I have a perspective that says when we want to put our money somewhere, we need to put it where it will do the most good, and the most good is raising and developing educated and caring citizens, and that comes through the schools by and large. And so if we're going to pick a department at the exclusion of all the others, I would choose the Board of Ed. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Lucas, what can the Board of Selectmen do to encourage economic development?
There's a long list. I'm going to try to do that in 2 minutes. There's a tremendous amount of opportunity in Canton to encourage economic development. That includes making sure that we're really digging deep on some of the delinquent landowners that we have. We have some blighted properties. We have property holders that have rents that are settled too high. We also need to create a climate that's bringing in new developers. We need to make sure that we are doing everything we can to market Canton, to publicize Canton, and to explain what makes it great. We need to continue the efforts of the EDA and Neil Pade to remove all of the obstacles and the challenges to economic development.
And I'd also say that we need to really investigate how we can support arts and culture as an economic driver in town. It's been proven over and over again, particularly in small towns and rural areas, that small arts-based businesses really are driving what there is left of powerful retail in America. And there's just a tremendous amount of opportunity here in Canton to capitalize on what we have.
Thank you. Ms. Deutsch, what can the Board of Selectmen do to encourage affordable housing in town?
Affordable housing is really important for our town. We need a diverse population so we can encourage millennials to come back. We have a place for our seniors. We need to have diverse housing, and it's not that hard to do. We have a form-based code that's been developed in the town of Canton, and it really lends itself to the development of affordable housing. So that, for example, if we were to redevelop the Canton Village, we could have businesses and stores on the bottom. We could have small apartments on the top. We could go up 2 or 3 stories and have multiple use dwellings. It just would be a very effective way to put in affordable housing. Affordable housing has places to be. You don't put affordable housing in your wonderful woods and your natural resources, but there are places where affordable housing will do very well, and we can do that.
Thank you. This is a question that's going to go, well, not directly right down the line, but for all of you. What are your priorities for Canton in the next 5 years? We'll start with Mr. Blakeslee.
Excellent question. First and foremost, I want to maintain Canton, the great town that it is, and seek to improve it to the extent we can, and I think we can. We need to continue to include people and make Canton diverse and welcome open-mindedness, and also maintain our property taxes, and also try to draw in business. As some other folks have alluded to, development in Canton is very problematic, and the taxpayers shoulder that burden. Unlike our neighboring towns that have significant development, and we have the opportunities along 44, Canton Village, in Collinsville, and the Axe Factory in particular, and there are other opportunities throughout town. But certainly those developmental opportunities will draw in more people and help alleviate the tax burden on our citizens, particularly our aging population. Canton's not alone with that issue with an aging elderly population, and that's a vulnerable population that don't always have the resources to pay ever-increasing taxes, even though I'm proud to say that Canton has had minimal tax increases over the years. But I think that those are some of the issues that we face and some of the opportunities that are out there to address those. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Humphrey.
Yeah, for me, the priorities that I see in the next 5 years is the Collins Company. I'm so old, I still call it the Collins Company. I noticed the new term is Axe Factory, so I've tried to call that the Collins Company Axe Factory to combine everybody. But it's getting that thing redeveloped, remodeled, restored, get the roof repaired. I know it's in private property now, but I think the town can do things, and we are doing things to encourage the development of that property. I think trying to get the utilities out to Route 44, especially the north side of Route 44, when you go from Lovely Street out to about East Hill, we need to be able to get utilities there. Very expensive thing. I believe we're going to solve that in the next 5 years. We may not have implemented it, but we will have solved it. We've gotten the answer. And then the final thing is that we've talked about several times tonight is the fire department. And by that I'm including both the Collinsville Fire Station. We've got to make some decisions as to what we're going to do there. I believe that's going to take several iterations, but we will have, in the next 5 years, we will have decided and determined what we're going to do, and we will begin proceeding on it. And then, of course, following on that as well is what are we going to do about the paying of the firemen, the firefighters that will occupy that station. We don't want to go a full-blown, well, I won't get into that. I was going to say fully completely paid fire department, that becomes very expensive, but there are things that we can do. So those are my 3 priorities: the axe factory, utilities to 44, and the fire station.
Thank you. Mr. Leggett.
Thank you. Are we talking about 3 priorities in the next 5 years or 5 priorities in the next 3 years?
You can have as many priorities as you want, but you only have 5 years.
All right. Well, I'm aiming for 5 priorities in the next 5 years. Certainly, we need to continue to see good progress in the hydro project down on the river and generating electricity therefrom. The Collins Company complex is falling apart in front of our eyes, and daily or monthly it creates more of a cost to renew it. I'm just so hopeful that we can find a group who are able to come in and provide the seed money to get that going. The firehouse and the paid fire department issue is a high priority. I would like to see us work hard to find some revision to our tax base so that property taxes don't carry such a big load when it comes to funding what the town does. And piggybacking on what Warren said, to increase the infrastructure in our town, the mechanicals, under the street, overhead, access, so that we can facilitate development. Property taxes can't carry the load by themselves, and increase in development and increase in business taxes would go a long way to help that. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Lucas.
I'm going to try to find a way to answer this without cheating the closing statement. I definitely agree on the axe factory and on the infrastructure. I do think that, to echo what Mr. Leggett said, we need to increase the grand list in general. We need to increase development. I would add to that we need to do that in a way that is respectful of not just the environment, but also the current residents. We have been hearing a lot about traffic and parking and difficulties in Collinsville. We have a tendency to think about development in Canton as development in Collinsville. There's a lot more to Canton. There's a lot more to the communities, to the individuals, to the attractions in our town, and we really need to think about it as a whole. I would add to that making sure that our community is a whole community, that we're not just focused on individual clusters within Canton. We all live here. I'm up in North Canton. I have friends and family in Collinsville. Looking at the Eastern Gateway is also critical. All of these are individual nodes that really warrant individual attention on the part of the Board of Selectmen and the other entities in town. So I'd say that really, above all is really the overarching priority of making sure that we're all working together. We're working with the CAO, Bob Skinner, and we're putting together an action plan for the next 5 years and beyond, and understanding what steps it's going to take to accomplish that plan. That's it.
Thank you. Ms. Deutsch.
I believe that it's very critical that we protect our open spaces and our environment. It's the heart of Canton. We have our bike paths, we have our people walking, we have our kayaking, we have our land trust trails. This is kind of what drew us to Canton. I was born in the Bronx, and so this is like heaven here. We need to protect this. It is our character. We need to value our arts and culture. We need to protect quality education. This is core to Canton, and as we plan for the future, these things are the very basics of what we need to plan for. We can build on that. We can build economic development based on the natural environment and our wonderful resources. If you have people coming to kayak on the river, they might stay at a very nice little bed and breakfast. They want to eat at a nice restaurant. They might want to shop for things that they can support their sports. By developing what's core to us, we can be developing Canton in a good way, build our tax base, and not be hurting any taxpayers because we're bringing money into our town. We also need to care for our most vulnerable citizens. We have the largest percentage of senior citizens of any in the Farmington Valley, and that's a growing number. We need to be sure that we're prepared for it and that we protect, we're building to protect them. Thank you.
Thank you. We do have time for one more round of questions before we go to the closing statements, if that's agreeable with everybody.
Sure.
Okay. I'm going to reuse some of the questions we've gotten before. I don't think you mentioned the firehouse. What's your feeling? That seems to be a hot topic.
Me?
It goes first to Ms. Blakely.
Okay.
Sorry.
I thought you were looking at me.
I'll address both the firehouse and the paid firefighters. We discussed earlier about volunteering and public participation and the lack of it. We suffer that issue throughout this town and throughout the state of Connecticut and nationally. Garnering people or getting people to volunteer is just nearly impossible. Most homes today are dual income folks who work out of their own respective towns, and that's the same here in Canton. So when we need help with firefighting during the day in particular, we look to neighboring towns. And that reciprocity is also looked upon us when Simsbury or Farmington or other neighboring town needs help. So I think it's paramount, and we do need paid firefighters to work with our volunteer firefighters. On the firehouse, I'm currently a member of the Strategic Planning Committee for Fire and EMS. We're evaluating a lot of these issues, and certainly as a current member of the Board of Selectmen, that issue is before us. We're looking at the cost and opportunities, whether we should build a new firehouse, whether we do nothing, or whether we rehab the existing firehouse. Certainly that's a decision. I think that it would be premature for me to weigh in on that, on where I'd go on that, because we just don't have enough information before us. But I think in the coming months we'll certainly have that information, but I think that's a pressing need for the town, as with the paid firefighters.
Thank you. Mr. Humphrey. I'm going to give you a different question. Sorry. This round, everybody gets a different one. Climate change is causing more severe and extreme rainfall and other extreme weather events. What plans do you have for Canton to plan for mitigating the risk of increasing flooding from the Farmington River?
So one of the things has already occurred and has already gone on, and I think will continue in our future building projects, and that is the Public Works facility. Public Works facility was reworked and redesigned to bring it above the 100-foot flood level, and that also improved the situation where the water treatment facility plant is. In the process of doing the Public Works facility, now we discovered several previously unknown storage tanks underground. We got those cleaned up, so we've done a lot of work in and around, along the river, along that flood-prone area. We've done that already. I like to joke, I tell people that I'm so old that I can remember when Old River Road was River Road, and that was wiped out by the 55 flood. And now River Road goes up by the fire station and the police department. But so I think there's things like that. The hydroelectric project has been mentioned. We're improving the dam. That dam structure is getting improved. The flashboards are going to be there that are going to be able to be adjusted to be 1 to 3 foot increase in containment upstream from that. That will help in terms of the flooding situations. So I think that we're doing a pretty decent job of thinking about all of these things as we go through in our planning our infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Leggett, What is your position on the use of pesticides on town-owned land, and any support for prohibiting use of pesticides on private property?
In general, I'm a person who wants to protect the rights of landowners to do whatever they want to with their land. I understand that that has to be compromised for the general good, so obviously we can't do anything and everything we want to do with our land. We can't waste it. We can't provide danger, put in dangers for our neighbors. Using pesticides is a potential danger only to the extent that it will run off and cause damage to people downstream or next door. I understand that they're airborne. The PFAS issue right now in Connecticut is a good example. There must be other alternatives that we have to avoid having to use that foam. Most of the things that would be potential pesticides for landowners probably have creative solutions in the wing, and I would look to those. As far as using pesticides on town-owned land, when I was on the Board of Selectmen in the early 2000s, we had this issue come up regarding what to do with the baseball diamond at Bowden Field, and it's an ongoing and it's an evolving discussion, because as we reflect and determine where our concerns are, new ways of dealing with the problem come up. So I'm hopeful that progress can be made in that way rather than having to go backwards. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question, okay, it goes to Ms. Lucas. Do you feel that the transfer station, the existing transfer station needs improvement? And if so, what would you recommend?
I don't have a strong opinion on the transfer station. I think that there's some infrastructure issues there, there's some traffic issues there, and there are some safety issues there. But overall, it's not a huge issue for me.
Thank you.
I'm not going to make it up.
No, but that's fine. Honesty is always the best policy. Okay, Ms. Deutsch. What should the town be doing to encourage commercial development in the Route 44 corridor?
Route 44 corridor, there's some light there. There's some wonderful businesses there, but there's some empty businesses. We have the diner that's been there empty for almost 20 years. We have the gas station that used to be our best mechanic in the world, and he's not there anymore. But what do we need to do to encourage it? So we have, as Canton, we have something called tax incremental financing, which will encourage people to come in and start building. This kind of financing lets them get in cheap and then pay back as they become successful to the town. It's a good way because as they become more successful, the town becomes more successful. The other way to improve 44 is through arts and culture. If we really build our arts and culture, we can invite the artists to put their artwork into the windows of these empty places to make it look good. We can invite them to paint the buildings, put up sculpture, make our town look better, and money follows the arts. So that's a start, but we also need to rely on our form-based code so that we do this correctly. We don't want to put a bunch of junk on 44, but there are lots of possibilities. I've heard people say that there are a lot of problems with developing Canton, and I really feel very, very optimistic about Canton. I think that we have such good bones in our town that I think we can grow. We have so many opportunities to develop, and we're just a great place to be. People will come to us.
Thank you. We will now go to the closing statements. And again, we start with Mr. Blinkley.
Thank you. Let me begin by first and foremost thanking the League of Women Voters in Canton for hosting this event and allowing the candidates to express themselves, educate the public, and inform the public, and explain about what their values are, what their vision is for Canton. I had prepared scripted remarks, but I think I'm just going to go from the heart and give more about my personal background and why I think you should vote for me. My grandfather's a 2-term state legislator. My father is a 5-term mayor, and I was born in Connecticut, but moved up to upstate New York on a small dairy farm on the Canadian border. It wasn't until 16 years ago, I obtained my bachelor's and master's in environmental science and water and wetland resources, and then went to law school and came to Connecticut. And wow, what a different perspective to come from a 200-acre dairy farm to Hartford, Connecticut. But it's been a wonderful opportunity, and moving to Connecticut, it allowed me to see a different culture, different group of citizens, particularly in Canton. And I'm a lawyer by trade, and I think that value, skill set, knowledge is a value add to the Board of Selectmen, given what I do daily as a litigator. And I certainly serve as a fiduciary, as a trusted advisor, and as a listener and problem solver. And those are the same skill sets and things that I bring to the table as a current member of the board, and what I hope to continue to bring to the board. Usually, most of the time, clients come to me after the fact when they need an issue with resolving a problem. But I like to also advise them ahead of time. Certainly, moving to Canton was a family decision. I wanted to come to a small town community and have that small town charm, and continue with my customer service. And I guess I'm out of time, but I appreciate being here, and I look forward to November 5th. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Humphrey.
Thank you, League of Women Voters, for putting on tonight. Canton has been my hometown my whole life. It's a little odd in the sense that when I retired, I actually wound up coming back to live here. So I've lived here the last couple of years, but I chose to return to Connecticut. I chose to come to Canton in my retirement, to come back here. My mother and father grew up on family farms about a mile apart in Canton Center. I live on the remnants of my mother's family farm that's been in the family for over 150 years. And our roots go deep into the town. And my loyalty is to the town, because Canton is all I've known as a place to live, as a place to retire to. I knew when I was still on active duty in the Air Force that I was going to retire there. So Canton is a well-managed, well-maintained, well-superintended town. And we're standing on the backs of the people that came before us, the generations that came before us, and I want to continue that. So I envision in the year 2025, 6 years from now, which is 2 years longer than this term, that what we're going to see is that we're going to see the three facets of town. Canton is going to be very recognizable in 6 years, 6 to 10 years. North of 44, we'll see some residential growth as some of those towns, the farms, get broken up and are developed. That's probably where we're going to see most of our residential growth. The Route 44 business corridor we've talked about quite a bit. We will solve the utilities problem in 6 years. We might not have it implemented, but we'll solve it. But south of 44, where it's kind of a standard subdivision and the village, Collinsville is really going to excel, and it's all going to revolve around getting the axe factory, the Collins Company axe factory. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lujet.
Thank you. When I think about Canton in the next few years, I think of diversity, I think of balance, and I think of cooperation. Diversity by the fact of a variety of businesses versus single-family homes, by the difference between the lifestyles that people have, by the difference of affluence that exists in our town. That is all very, very healthy. And we need to promote it and continue it as best we can. Balance is always a goal, always a goal. Fiscal balance, racial, ethnic balance, affluence balance, and those things can affect the fiscal harmony that we have in this town, because as we think about all the different categories and groups that are in this town, we maintain a perspective that is inclusive of everyone when we have to make decisions about money. My experiences as a teacher and as a legislator in and for Canton have helped me to come to a perspective that there's no better way to help ourselves than to cooperate with the state of Connecticut and all the various funding models and variety of resources that exist there. So I would encourage us to push and promote those kinds of things as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Lucas. First, of course, thank you to the League of Women Voters. It's a privilege to be here on this stage. Canton is a pretty small town. For a small town, we have an almost inconceivable number of issues competing for attention and dollars. We have a small town staff that works incredibly hard, but it's still nearly impossible for residents to keep up with everything that's going on. Even if you pay attention, I can attest to that. As a marketer and a communications professional, as a resident and a parent, I would be deeply committed to making sure that we find ways to communicate with the public about every single important issue in town. I would make it my personal responsibility to report back to the town after every meeting. We need to use all of the tools at our disposal to ensure that our community is informed and involved. There is much work to be done over the next 4 years. We must improve our business climate, but not at the expense of the environment, the town's character, or our residents' comfort. We must stay vigilant that our schools maintain the highest standards of excellence and continue to reinforce the values of kindness, citizenship, tolerance, and acting with wisdom. We must turn our focus to the waterfront and what it can offer, as well as how to protect it and to deal with both the positives and the negatives of ecotourism, and which we're seeing right now. We must ensure that our seniors and fellow townspeople in need receive our support and our services, and that this is done openly and warmly. We must do all of the above with the keenest eye towards the bottom line, ensuring that we are creative about finding funding, seeking financial support from all corners and protecting our tax rates, and demanding that we receive everything we deserve from state and federal sources. Please come out and vote on November 5th. Bring your friends, bring your family. We need everybody in town. Thank you. Ms. Deutsch.
Thank you all for coming and listening to all of us, and thank you for participating in our town government. I've been deeply involved in our town in all the years we've lived here. I've been on the land trust board's treasurer. I've been Friends of the Canton Dog Park and the Canton Conservation Commission. I've been professionally an educator, a school administrator, and corporate consultant. I have a doctorate in educational leadership. Our family lived in New York and Texas before coming to Connecticut. We chose to live in Canton, a road less traveled. Coming to Canton has deeply influenced me. Robert Frost talked about roads less traveled. 2 roads diverged on a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both and be one traveler. Long I stood and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. I shall be telling this with a sigh somewhere ages and ages hence. 2 roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled, and that has made all the difference. Canton has made all the difference. Based on Canton's influence on me, I'm honored to give back to our town. I promise I'll protect our open spaces and environment, value arts and culture, and quality education, practice smart growth and development while effectively managing tax revenue and protecting the most vulnerable citizens. You deserve a government that's transparent, honest, and ethical. Next, you need people who are willing to listen to you, to work hard, and to do competent research on all issues. I believe I have the skills to work effectively to improve our wonderful town of Canton. Please vote November 15th. November 5th. November 5th. It's my birthday.
Thank you very much, and that ends our Board of Selectmen.
Thank you everyone for coming out, and we will be airing this on TV. Please look to the Town of Canton website and the Canton League of Women Voters website for the links to the airing times that this will be on. And when you type in Canton League of Women Voters, make sure you say Canton, Connecticut, because otherwise you'll end up with Canton, Ohio. Thank you all for coming. And don't forget